Consultation Podcast Network.
Firmly grasp it in your hand. Firmly grasp it.
No!
Firmly grasp it. That ought to do it.
Blood and Black Rum Podcast presents the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Hey guys, welcome back to the Blood and Black Rum Podcast. I'm Ryan from themoonisadeadworld.net and cultsploitation.com, and I'm joined by my co-host Martin.
How's it going?
And we're back today. We had said that we were going to do a different film for today's episode last week.
No, I don't think we said.
We didn't really decide, but it was kind of almost decided that we're going to do Phenomena, which is being released on Blu-ray by Synapse Films. They recently did a steelbook, and now they're releasing it on regular Blu-ray. It was a perfect time to cover it, because I just received it. We already did Tenebrae before that. And then Suspiria, I just pre-ordered the $50 steelbook Blu-ray from Synapse Films. So it was a perfect time. Like, we could just do them all at the same time. You know, Dario Argento. I have a full Dario Argento coverage on the podcast.
Well, we are Jello.
Yeah, we're a Giallo-centric podcast that doesn't do Giallos very often.
You know, it's funny, though. Every time I hear Suspiria, I just want to, like, replace it, Def Leppard's Hysteria. Like, Suspiria!
You've never seen Suspiria.
No,
Have you ever heard the Goblin soundtrack?
I'm sure I would love it.
Amazing. So it's I'm not even saying that like ironically. I really do think it's a really great soundtrack.
Well, I don't think you could say ironically, because I do love Goblin.
No, but you know how sometimes their soundtracks don't always tend to fit the exact scenarios that are occurring in the film. I'm thinking Dawn of the Dead sort of idea there.
Tenebrae.
Yeah, Tenebrae.
Well, at least with the theme.
Suspiria does tend to fit within the context of the film, so that is an added layer to it. I will say that. Even though Goblin's always very catchy and toe-tapping, even in its most sinister moments.
I wouldn't be surprised if, like, in one of these films, like, eventually you just hear, like, Umberto, like, Tozzi's Gloria play, Gloria, Gloria.
Yeah.
Like, if someone's, like, getting brutally murdered. That's why it's, like, one of the best parts of, like, Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah.
When, you know, the boat's, like, getting, you know, crashed into the waves and sinking, and it's awesome. I love that part.
So the plan was to do Phenomena this week.
Now you're gonna have to wait till November.
Yeah, we're gonna have to push it out because, unfortunately, we lost Tobe Hooper this past weekend. He died on Saturday. Found out about it on Sunday morning. Again, very eerily reminiscent to a lot of the other times that we kind of hear about people who have passed away. You know, specifically when we did our George Romero retrospective, not that long ago, really. Only, like 2 months ago? Something like that. Maybe not even.
No, not even.
Not even 2 months ago. And bringing up retrospectives, Wes Craven's, the anniversary of his passing is like right around now. It's like either yesterday. It's very close. So like we're right upon it. So very eerily, you know, all of those things kind of falling into place. And unfortunately, we lost Tobe Hooper, and it was surprising too because we had just done a Tobe Hooper episode with the Mangler. And I said to Martin, I texted him, I said, you know, Tobe Hooper just died. Pretty sure he wouldn't want us to go out on the Mangler for one of his films that we covered.
I think
no offense to the man, but
I think he likes it.
He probably likes it.
I have been thinking about that movie since we've watched it, actually, and I do enjoy it. As we said during the review, like, it's objectively not a good movie.
Right.
At the same time, though, it's just
fun.
So goddamn fun. Like, and I know I probably come across as like brow held high, uppity, like, you know.
I only like The Godfather
and Citizen Kane and Vertigo. Yeah. But, you know, I do enjoy, you know, certain schlock. you know, everyone has like certain cheese and bad things, you know, garbage that they like.
The Mangler's one of them.
Mangler's one of them. It's
surprisingly.
Not surprisingly, it's great.
Yeah.
If you got Ted Levine, you're like, numbnuts, then, you know, you're...
You got a golden movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like we said in the show, I mean, it's not a good movie, but we got a lot of comments on that episode about the Mangler, and people have very good, like, memories of that film, of watching that film, because it is so fun. And, you know, they realize, too, this is not a good movie, like, objectively speaking, but just to watch it, sit down, and just have a good time, it's definitely one of the higher points of movie making.
I hope one day it gets, like, a cult following, like The Room and Troll 2, like, where you'll be seeing people, like, having, like, midnight parties to celebrate at, like, local cinemas.
Surprisingly, the Mangler doesn't really have that I've seen. You know, there's not very many people talking. You know, when I put out the actual, like, I posted it on certain forums, I posted it on, like, Reddit and stuff like that, asking people what they thought about the Mangler. You know, that brought out responses. But I haven't really seen a lot of people, like, just talking about the Mangler. Like, well, you know, I know it's not a good film, but I absolutely love the Mangler. They'll say that about The Room. But in Troll 2. But I've never really seen that about the Mangler.
Well, the Room's a whole different beast.
Yeah, for sure.
A brilliant beast.
But I the only thing that, though, is that I wanted to cover a Tobe Hooper film that was actually one that people remember for being good, for people actually liking it, becoming a cult film, cult classic. So I wanted to go out with that rather than, you know, leaving Tobe Hooper's legacy on our Blood and Black Rum podcast as the Mangler. So, you know, and that's not a slight to the Mangler. It's a great film. But we wanted to cover something a little bit more, you know, like we did with George Romero. You know, something that had a legacy for Tobe Hooper. So we decided to do the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's one that we had been. I'm gonna leave this till the end of the episode to announce, but it's gonna tie in with something that we're doing for the podcast coming up. So we'll leave that to the end of the episode to actually flesh that out. But just suffice to say that it does tie in pretty well with what we have planned. So, you know, there's a few films that you could pick for a Tobe Hooper film that had some legacy to it. One of my favorites from him is The Funhouse. Really fun film. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Have you?
No.
It's such a fun film. Again, it's not one of those films that you would say, like, is objectively a good film. I wouldn't say that it's a bad film. It doesn't reach the Mangler, like, depths of, you know, kind of humorous comedy. But it is not one of the better slasher films to come out around the 80s. But it's a really fun film, especially...
To be fair, the 80s did not have a lot of
No,
good
they didn't have a lot of good ones. But it definitely... It was one of those slasher films that had some heart to it. You know, they were really trying to go for something a little bit different. And I'm a sucker for any film that takes place on, like, a carnival or a theme park or something like that. Anything that has, like, that sort of attraction to it.
Makes you think of, like... at least makes me think of, like, that one Are You Afraid of the Dark episode. Yeah,
it's kind of like that. Exactly. And I'm sure Are You Afraid of the Dark took some inspiration from the Funhouse making that episode. And that's kind of like that's what it's like. And I have a lot of fun with the Funhouse. I think it's a really fun film. It's one of my favorites from Tobe Hooper. And I wouldn't have mind covering that, but the Texas Chainsaw Massacre just has a lot more legacy behind it. So it was one that, you know, lended itself to doing a retrospective episode. How much experience do you have with Tobe Hooper's films? Besides, you know, obviously we've seen The Mangler, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. What else have you seen from Tobe Hooper?
Poltergeist.
Okay.
And that's probably it.
And Poltergeist pretty much it.
And this Texas Chainsaw Massacre too.
Yep.
Because I know he did do that. He didn't do the...
He did not return for the third, but yeah. But, yep, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. He did Life Force. He did Invaders from Mars, which is kind of a fun and almost more childlike horror film from the 80s about a kid who sees aliens landing in his backyard and kind of has to to fight them.
Let's take E.T. and turn it on its ear.
Kind of, yeah, a little bit.
It's probably like after Poltergeist, like, you know what, Steven? I'm gonna make a movie that makes fun of E.T.
Yeah, pretty much. And I wrote up a retrospective too for Cultsploitation on Tobe Hooper, and I did talk a little bit about Poltergeist, and that kind of I would say shading on Tobe Hooper's career of there's always that question of who directed Poltergeist. Was it actually Tobe Hooper, or was it really Spielberg that was calling the shots behind the scenes? And I don't think that it really matters. I think that Tobe Hooper had a lot of say over the direction of it, and whether Spielberg stepped in to help direct, and it was his production. So at that point, you can't really blame Tobe Hooper for being like, oh, I didn't get a chance to direct this, and saying like he didn't have a say. I can see Spielberg taking the reins and just being like, what, I'm paying for this fucking movie, so it's going to be the way that I want it to be.
Well, no, because no, you're right, because producer's the one bankrolling it. So
exactly.
So if
I can absolutely.
There's especially back in the early history of film, where films were producer driven and not director driven. It wasn't like you're the director, you have this.
Yeah, you got a vision.
You have a vision. No, we don't care. I'm fucking funding this film, organizing it, getting it all together. You do what the hell I want you to do.
I absolutely think that.
So which if that's the case, then that's the case. Like, that's what he did. What
he had to do. He did what his job was, and. If anybody's not to blame, it's Tobe Hooper, because from a production standpoint, I can just imagine, you're getting all this backlash from production. No, we don't want this. No, we don't want this. Okay, well then, what do you want? And you do it the way that you want it, because obviously you have this vision for it that I am not fulfilling. So it's really not. There's no blame there.
Which also takes a special personality, because I, for one, would not be able to be that if I was ever directing.
You wouldn't be able to.
That would I would have to be like an auteur, like a Wes Anderson or something, because I would be like no, fuck no.
Well, then you definitely would not have succeeded at that time.
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't be able to be I could never be like a Hollywood director. And be like, okay, you're gonna
because basically production would really take its toll on you. They'd be saying like, you're not doing this fast enough. You're spending way too much time and money on this one scene, and we need it done. I know. And then at that point, if it's not done, production's like, well, just cut it and go. That's it. You did what you did, and then it comes back on you.
I know, and it doesn't help either. I'm a perfectionist, so
exactly.
If you had to work with somebody like one take Brando, like I do one take, I'd be like, it's not quite good enough, Marlon.
At this point in Hollywood, we don't often see that, where a film just seems totally unfinished or totally like
Suicide Squad.
Like, well, it's a little bit different. You don't see it that often, but back then it was totally not uncommon to get a film that just did not come together, and you're like, you watch it now and you're like, why? Like, who would have put this out? Who would have decided like this was a finished product? Let's put it out.
Or the meddling behind, afterwards.
Well, you know what? That was production. That was everybody saying, you know what? Your max budget, what you've got is what you got. Put it together in the best way possible in post-production, and there you go. Send it out. That's what happened. And so I definitely, bringing it back to Tobe Hooper, I definitely don't blame Tobe Hooper for relinquishing whatever duties he had to Spielberg to please the man. He's paying for it, so you do what you can, and then you allow production to kind of call the shots for the budget. But it was a huge success for Hooper anyway, because he went on to the 80s were kind of a glory time for him. He went on to, like I said, he went on to do Life Force, Invaders from Mars, Eaten Alive, which is kind of like an offshoot of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, except the killer has a crocodile for a pet and stuff like that. Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 later on in the 90s. It was a glory time for him. And I think that Poltergeist really helped to boost his standing in Hollywood, and he got to do some really cool stuff because of it. So no fault there. Like I said, when it comes down to it, doesn't really matter who directed Poltergeist, who had the final say in it, because it's a good film regardless. Yeah. So whether there was it's actually kind of a marvel that there probably were two conflicting viewpoints on what Poltergeist was supposed to be, and it came out to be such a good film regardless of, that kind of divide between the two. So I love Poltergeist. I think it's a great film. Watched it again not too long ago. Still holds up. Still spooky.
As I say, it's definitely one of those horror films that definitely, like, cause we talked about in previous episodes about how, horror, especially, is really hard. Like, you can enjoy it for what it is and what happens, but overall, it is kind of hard to, like, be genuinely creepy.
Mm-hmm.
I think Poltergeist is one of those movies that is genuinely creepy, especially if you watch it at the right age.
Yeah.
Like when I first did, like when you're like 10 years old.
Right in that, that time frame of like post or pre-puberty to like, 15, something like that, 15, 16. It's a good time to watch it because it is, at that time, PG rating. Maybe not appropriate now, but for at that time there wasn't really any. Spielberg had yet to come out with his own rating system, so
Temple of Doom was not.
Yeah. So it was a PG rating, perhaps not appropriate, but it did too have those characters that were of that same age, post or I keep saying post. I mean pre-pubescent, and they were the ones that were most affected, and that is kind of the reason why if you're watching it at that age, you're going to be very affected too as a viewer, because you're like, wow, the ghosts are targeting me. they want mine soul. So I think it works out really well, and it is good for both kids and adults. I think, if I had a kid, I would probably let my kid watch Poltergeist at a younger age, probably to scare the shit out of them.
Well, yeah, it's PG.
I am a big proponent of scaring the shit out of your kids because I will say, like, I wasn't super terrorized when I was a kid, but I did like being scared, and that made me who I am today. And so I want to do the same for my kids and scare the shit out of them early so that they, they're ready for that. My sister, on the other hand, I scared countless times when I was a kid, just doing that thing, staring behind her into space like there's a monster behind her, stuff like that. Now she's terrified of everything. So maybe it doesn't work. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't work out so well after all. But I would let my kid watch Poltergeist. Other than that, as we did with like The Mangler, some of Tobe Hooper's later films, it kind of got a little bit cheesier, and you can kind of see that progression because once you get to like Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, I don't know how long it's been since you've seen that film.
High school.
Like, so long time.
Yeah.
Like, that we're getting ancient now.
And to be honest with you, the first time I saw it was in high school. I've seen it a couple of times, but the first time was like during a study hall.
Right.
On like in the senior lounge on TV. I think it was like on USA or something.
So it's been a while since you've seen it, but I watched it recently. I think Scream Factory released it like maybe 2 years ago. And I gotta say that it is a lot more corny and intentionally campy than the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I think that really that throws off some people who really like Texas Chainsaw Massacre because it is so much different. There's a very different feel and aesthetic to it.
When you make that jump, though, from in time between movies.
Oh yeah, there's a good almost 20 years between the two films.
So like a lot of films when they have that large gap between each film, it's like it's always a crapshoot.
Yeah,
like Super Troopers 2 is finally coming out.
Who knows with that?
Can't wait for it. At the same time, I know it's probably going to be a total disappointment.
Well, the one thing that I think though with Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is that it did set the precedent for Tobe Hooper's later works, like I said with The Mangler, and some of his later works like Mortuary. They definitely feel different from the Tobe Hooper of the 80s, and that's just a progression of directing for him. But I don't know that he had the same success later in life that he did in like the 70s and 80s. Still, he did stuff like Masters of Horror for Showtime. He did a couple episodes for them, and then he did. At that point, this in the 90s, it was a big time, late 80s, early 90s, big time for anthology series on TV. So HBO's Tales from the Crypt was really kicking off. You had Amazing Stories. He directed an episode of that.
Free of the Dark.
Yep.
Goosebumps.
Tales from the Dark Side. Things like that. They were really kicking off at that time, and so you kind of see Tobe Hooper moving more into that territory of, well, let's just direct, sort of a short story. Let's take, and he did that with a couple things. He's a very he's really into Stephen King too, because we talked like he directed The Mangler, which is a Stephen King short story. He did Salem's Lot, the TV special for CBS, which was like a 4-hour miniseries straight from Stephen King. And then also those shorts, they really feel like short stories almost, and it really lended itself in that late 80s, early 90s phase to like what he was doing. And he even went on to do a couple of movies that were anthologies, like Body Bags. So really interesting progression in his career, and it's nice to remember all of those good things that he left us with, because I think that a lot of his films have become big cult classics. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Part 2, Life Force, Eaten Alive, The Funhouse. Even Salem's Lot has a really big following. All of those have really contributed a lot to the horror genre. And we just wanted to take this time on the episode to remember that, reminisce, and give them a nice little retrospective before we launch into our Texas Chainsaw Massacre episode full throttle. So thank you, Tobe Hooper, for all you did, and we will certainly miss you.
John Carpenter, don't die.
We can't lose them all. All right, we're going to take a break, come back, and we're going to talk about a new beer for the show, so stay with us. All right, guys, we're back, and we got some beer for you today. Now, we've been talking about, we do a lot of Genny Pilot Batch Brewhouse beers.
Why?
We've done almost all of them.
Why?
Because you love them. Because you're a huge fan. I do too. I'm a big fan as well. I've become a huge fan of Genny because of the brewhouse style, I think. I even picked up a poster.
Of the
Genny girl. Genny girl
from the 50s. With a spooky Halloween.
Yeah, it's a spooky Halloween one.
Which very risque poster too, by the way. You can look it up on the
amazing
on the Genny.
You should pick it up. It's pretty cheap, and it's a huge poster. Yeah. I gotta get a frame for it.
They do have a lot of great posters and stuff on their website. Yeah. But no, you should look at it because it's on their website. If anyone wants to take a look, because it's a poster from the 50s, and Jenny's showing some cleavage.
Mm-hmm.
That's risque.
Yeah. So we do a lot of the brewhouse beers, but there was one that we weren't able to get because it hasn't been around here for a while. And it's really technically not around here where we are. It's about an hour and 20 minutes out.
No, 40 minutes.
40 minutes?
Yeah,
That's
40.
it? It's only about a 40-minute drive.
Yeah.
But it was in Ilion, and that's, it's about a 40-minute drive, and Martin braved the trip. I'm not available during the day, so he can do that sort of thing. He can do a road trip. But he was able to go out and get the Grungeist, which is Genny's special brewhouse pale ale.
Now, the one thing I don't get is it's been out since like mid to early summer. Like it got announced just after the Orange Honey Cream Ale, which we did talk about in the podcast.
Yep.
So I'm assuming it was supposed to be a summery beer.
I guess, yeah.
But they didn't get it just till now with the rest of their fall batch, because at the store I went to, all their summer stuff, they got marked down. So like if you want like a case of Travelers like grapefruit shandy, you can get a case for it for like $15.
Really?
It's all
wow.
They their Cerveza packs like marked down like by $4 or $5 because they're getting rid of their summer stock. That's a cool thing that the store does there. So I'm kind of surprised that they finally got the Grungeist, and it's with their fall beers. Because I wouldn't really say it's a fall beer.
No.
I also wouldn't really say it's a summer beer. It's a spring beer.
Right. Yeah. It's
at least to me, it tastes like a nice
It's kind of in the middle. I could see it as a fall beer. I guess. I think it's pretty refreshing. It's not at that point yet where you're getting into a heavier winter beer, but I could see it for fall. I guess. I don't think that's what they meant by it. I think it probably released for a summer release, I guess. Maybe not specifically for, as like, this is our summer beer.
Because that was definitely the Orange Honey Cream Ale.
But it was like around that same time. I don't really know if they had like schedules set up for it, but what it is it's a pale ale, and it has this special Grungeist German hop. And Grungeist is German for green ghost.
It's apparently a new hop variety that's been bred.
Yeah, I mean, I did see on Untappd, there's a couple people that do make a Grungeist beer with that hop, but it's not one that you like see a lot. You're seeing a lot of like Citra hops. You're seeing a lot of Mosaic hops. Grungeist, I can't say that I've seen a lot of, and I think this is a really interesting beer for them. They don't make a lot of pale ales, so it's kind of first of all, that's one thing that attracts you. I like pale ales. I like ones that don't go overboard into the IPA territory. And this one is definitely one that sits very cleanly on the pale ale side, not going overboard, hops like, IBUs into the IPA territory. This is very much a pale ale, and I think you'll agree, because you're one of the most outspoken people about those IPAs, that, pale ales becoming IPAs and, vice versa. They kind of like are crossing over now. There's not really
the line has been very, muddled. And as much as we drink beer and, like it and appreciate the art, we'll both admit we're not very astute, like, tasters when it comes to, like, differentiating, like, certain hops. Like, you can tell, like, you can describe, like, the certain, like, kind of flavors, but not, like, in great detail.
Yeah, I mean,
and you won't be able to, like, I'll never be able to, like, discern certain hops.
Never be able to pick it out, like, well, this one has.
And again, like, I think that's, like, total bullshit. People are like, oh, I can, it's like when you read, like, a whiskey description, and it's like, that vanilla you're tasting does not exist.
I guess the only thing that you would really pick out is if there's a particularly skunky cat piss flavor of hop, and you'd be like, yep, that's the one. You know that, like, especially if you're, like, not really a fan of it. You would know. Yeah. But other than that, I do have a difficult time, like, picking out, okay, well, this is this hop and this is that hop. I'm not a very good taster.
I never gotten a chance to go, like, on a brewery tour, but I, like, had to, like, sit there and have, like, somebody, like, like, this is, like, the one that you're having now. And because they all have very, like, floral and citrus hops, that they use for pale ales and IPAs have very floral and citrusy notes to them. Mm-hmm. And discerning, like, this one's more passion fruit instead of grapefruit, it's pretty hard. At least it is for me. Like I said, maybe I'm just a layman and I'm not sophisticated.
I definitely don't have a good palate.
Or it's, just made up science. But, yeah. But anywho, I enjoy this. Got a little off track there, but I greatly enjoy this. This Grungeist fits perfectly within what a pale ale, especially an American pale ale, should be. It's got that nice citrus hop character to it, but it's definitely not overboard. You get a nice crisp, and it says passion fruit. I wouldn't say passion fruit. I'd say more grapefruity. Mm-hmm. Like, it has, like, a grapefruit bitterness to it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would say passion fruit, and I don't know. But
then I don't go out of my way to really eat passion. You know?
Yeah. I don't know if I'd really.
It's not something in upstate New York that you see. Like, you're like, yo, would you like some passion?
Yeah.
But that I get. It's got a very, it does have, like, a nice citrus taste to it, but it's not overpowering. The IBUs on it aren't that heavy, and they describe the finish as clean, and you know what? I don't really ever like that as a description. But it's true. It's very crisp. It's very clean. Like, you drink it and it goes down very easy, and it's very palatable.
Yeah, I would venture to say that even people who don't really like pale ales will probably like this beer because it is so crisp and clean and easy to drink.
And it's 6% too.
Yeah, it goes down very smooth and very quickly. I know I drank 2 really fast. It's just a very tasty beer. I don't know that if you are drinking this, that you will particularly be able to pick out, like, oh, okay, that's the distinctive Grungeist flavor.
Like, they could have just called it like their pale ale because they haven't really done a pale ale.
They don't make a pale ale, so I don't know that anybody will really be able to pick that out specifically, but I do think it has kind of a distinctive flavor for a pale ale. It definitely doesn't taste like a Sierra Nevada pale ale,
which is totally so that's like one thing you can tell. Like that's definitely like that's a shit ton of West Coast style hops,
right? And this one, if I had to equate it to anything, I guess I would go with maybe like Sam Adams Noble Pills, something like that. I think it has
definitely not as florally.
Yeah,
because Sam Adams has the 5, different.
But I think it does. It has sort of that flavor to it rather than more West Coast IPA style.
Call it Noble Pills Light. Because Noble Pills, which is a beer I do like, I wish they would, bring it back to making like a staple spring beer instead of because that's like the one beer they're constantly fucking around with. They can't ever have. It's got to be like Cold Snap or Whitewater IPA, and just bring back and make it the Noble Pills. Have that 5 hop Pilsner, and it's hoppy and florally as shit, but it's great. For being a Pilsner that's got that Pilsner body and character to it, but it's got very hoppy. And I think, even though this isn't a Pilsner, it's got, the body of a pale ale, but it does have that kind of hop characteristic of the Noble Pills, but not nearly as floral.
Yeah. I think, it's really good. I think that a lot of people will enjoy this beer. And like I said, it goes down really easy. So check it out. See if you can find it.
Might be why they call it the Ghost. Green Ghost. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's gone.
I really do. I mean, this is probably one of my favorites from the Brewhouse series.
It's up there for me.
Yeah, I would definitely put it up there. The orange honey cream, like these two, really for summer, they really hit the mark. Yeah.
One for the hot day and one for your campfiring nights.
Now they have a new one coming out, and it's going to be an old ale, and that one is
that's only going to be in bars though.
Yes,
in the Rochester.
Yes. It's not even around. It's going to be coming out in bottles or anything. It's just going to be close to their area where they make the beer. And that, as you know, we've only covered one old ale on the show, and that's because neither of us are big fans of it, of that style of beer. So I would be interested to give that one try and see how it is.
I would try it if you paid for it. There's no way I'd put money down for that. No.
I definitely have to. I'd have to pay for it to try it. Sure, I would try it, but I know from experience, old ale's not really my thing. I don't really like the pruny sort of like this has been sitting around a while style. So I don't know how much I'd enjoy it, but it does look cool. The can looks cool.
It did. No, and what sucks too is like the actual like color and look of the beer looks really good. Like oh, that looks like a great.
It does,
like
yeah.
a great winter beer. Like,
yep.
Hey, 12 feet of snow's coming down. Sit by the fire and drink that. You know?
And that's the thing too, is that I really wish I did like old ales and double box more than I do, because the
quadruples,
the aesthetic of them is very appealing
for like the winter
sitting down. I'm almost thinking of like olden times where like I've got the candle out, I've got the fireplace going, and I'm sitting down with an old ale or a double bock. But in reality, I just can't. I don't really have the preference for that. I had another double bock recently too. We've had the Genny double bock on here before, and I had Trog's double bock on like a little while ago, and it was very, very similar. And again, I'm just not a huge fan. It's just not my cup of tea, or in this case, cup of beer. And I think it has to do with that like pruny sort of raisiny dried fruit flavor. It just doesn't do much for me. I would take pretty much any other beer over that.
No, I agree. Like it's not like Almagang's, 3 philosophers like quad.
Yeah.
Like is regarded as like, oh, what a terrific beer. I don't like it.
They're good for like one time. Like just a little bit. I could have like one glass.
A little flight.
Right. I could have one glass of double bock, and then I'd be good. And I'm like, oh, I'm done with that. Hit me up with something else.
Treat it like a shot. Like I'm toast.
Right.
It's made me toasty, and
yeah, I think that's it. And but when you get a growler of it, and you're really just kind of fighting through it. So, but that's an interesting old ale. We'll have to see if we can get our hands on it in any way, shape, or form, just to try it.
I probably would just if they do if it does somehow make it into the actual bottling for the pilot batch series, I will go out of my way to get just because. And the winter warmer too is
Yep.
Which we did the Genny winter warmer. That's
Raisin.
old ale style beer too.
Yeah.
And that's
the one thing that does interest me about that new old ale though is that it's bourbon aged. So I think that could be a defining factor for it. That's one thing that would really interest me about it.
The great thing about that post that I saw too from them about that today, the first comment on it was, "This better not slow down the canning of Genny Cream Ale."
I did see that, yes. And they said, "Nope, totally different production." Yeah, I did see that. Yeah, that was really funny.
Because that's something I would post like. I would make. Don't let that slow you down from making
Yeah. That man was very focused on one thing and one thing only.
We really do need to go out there because we haven't been out to they do have not just like their brewery, but they also have a brew house, which is like a pub restaurant. And we got to go out there because they do have more pilot batch style series beers there, but you can only get them at only there. Like
yeah, we've missed a couple.
Like their Heffa. I mean, I'd give their Heffa a try.
Sure.
Pilsner, their alt beer.
Yep. Yeah, we missed a couple, and we definitely need to give those a
It's the only way you can get their 12-horse ale.
We'll do a live podcast from there.
We should.
That'd be fun.
We roll in and tell them, like, hey,
we're doing a podcast.
Probably should tell them, like, hey, we've reviewed like a shit ton of your beers on our podcast, and they're like, we'll sponsor you.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
I would sit here and do every episode in a Genny trucker hat, wearing like my.
Today, I realized last week we did Genny Cream Ale, so we're gonna go a little bit different today, and we're gonna do Genny Light.
No, they wouldn't want me doing that because that would get buried. That's the worst. That would be beer. Funny. That's the worst light beer ever.
Yeah, Genny, we would be interested in the sponsorship if you're listening.
We're big Boris Set fans too. We're sad to see him retire from NASCAR.
But check it out, Genny Grungeist.
Which that's the one thing that sucks too. Like I know, like Genny's not national, but they do distribute in quite a few number of states. But the pilot batch doesn't really seem to make it out of like Northeast New York. Like not Northeast, Northeast in total.
Local.
Like Pennsylvania is like almost as far south as like the pilot badge series stuff goes.
Yeah,
but
check it out though.
But we do have also real quick.
Yeah,
a major, and we'll put that in air quotes. Major craft beer too on here.
Yes, we have Magic Hat on here.
Oh God,
we've probably mentioned, neither of us are fans of Magic Hat. I think the number 9 is okay. Martin distinctly hates it.
It's the worst beer I've ever had in my life.
But I tend to get a little bit more lenient of them around Halloween because they come out with the Night of the Living Dead pack. And their Hex Oktoberfest is actually very good. So that's one beer they make that's I would say is outstanding.
No, I agree, and it's a different type of Oktoberfest.
Yeah,
like because their whole, Magic Hat's whole gimmick is they take things and,
they try things with them. They're experimental,
and not just like experiment. They're goofy experimental.
Yeah.
Like the number. That's one of the things that pisses me off about the number 9. It's like not quite pale ale. Yeah, no shit. It's not. It's not a pale ale. It's a fruit beer.
Yeah. It's
like they're like fuck you for that. Don't call it like not quite. So maybe you're thinking like it's like a session pale ale or something like a very light hoppy. No. It's a pear apricot fruit beer.
Right, and Magic Hat has the distinction of being having one beer that I just literally could not drink, which was in one of their Night of the Living Dead packs. It was some sort of like tart apple.
Oh, the green apple.
Yeah, green apple sour beer. Was just terrible, and it tasted like puke, and I could not drink it.
I remember from one of their summer packs. Had to be like 5 years ago. It was like their hibiscus cucumber one. Oh, it was disgusting.
Couldn't do it. Well, I had to get this one. Unfortunately, it does not have the Hex. It also doesn't have a Wilhelm Scream in it, which is their pumpkin ale, which is good for me because I generally tend to keep those laying around. I still have one actually.
I don't think I've had the Wilhelm Scream, but I do like pumpkin ales.
I'm not a huge fan. I'm not a huge fan of pumpkin, but But they do have, it's a 4-pack. It's got 4 different beers in it. They've got their stout, which is Heart of Darkness. I guess a lot of people really like this Heart of Darkness stout. I think it's just okay. I've got it right now.
It is a good
it's fine
for like a session session stout. If you want to be fancy and like show like you're better than your fucking friends, and you're sitting around like the campfire at night, with your friends hanging out, that's the beer you bring.
Yeah,
because it's a very easy stout to drink. It's It's Guinness, but with an actual body to it, and not nitro widgeted, so it feels like it's creamy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good. It's not like the best stout I've ever had, but like you said, it's one of those beers that you can sit around, and you can also, it's not very heavy, so you could drink quite a few of these, even though it's a stout. And when I'm thinking stout, I can only drink one. It's very heavy. This is not so much that it's not heavy, so you could have quite a few of those.
Like
so
session stout.
Yeah, so it is interesting in that sense. I think it's pretty good. There's a Scotch ale in there, which I think is it's a fine plain Scotch ale, but there's nothing that really stands out about it.
Which is what I'm drinking right now, and I agree. I like it because as we talked about last year when we reviewed like the Sam Adams Scotch ale. And it's like, thank you, Jesus. Why don't they bring this back, back more? Scotch ale is a totally underrated style of beer.
Yeah.
So, like, drinking this, I appreciate it. Like, yeah, I'm drinking a Scotch ale.
Yeah.
Because I don't get to have these that often, because nobody fucking makes them, really. Genny Pilot Batch does. That's actually one of their staples that you get year-round is their Scotch ale. It's very good, and we've done that in the podcast before. But I drink this, and it's, it's good. There's nothing discernible about it, though. It's almost like, even though it's 7%, it's almost like it is a session Scotch ale, because it's like, there's not like such a hot, like a malty, heavy body characteristic to that would make it like, ooh, I'm drinking Scotch ale. It's like, yeah, I'm drinking Scotch ale. Like, if you have like 3 real quick, you're like, ooh, I'm pretty sleepy now.
Yeah. And then real quick, they've got the black lager, which I thought was actually really good. Probably one of the best in the pack. And their amber pale ale, which I believe is pretty new. I found it to be a little bit too sweet and cloying for my taste, and that's prevalent in many Magic Hat beers. It's something to do with the adjunct or malts that they use in it that gives it an artificial sweetness that I'm not a huge fan of. It comes off in a lot of their beers.
And I agree.
So that amber pale ale, it really like kicks in there. There's a lot of sweetness to it. Not a fan of that one so much, and it's very similar to the Electric Peel that they've released previously, which is like their style of IPA, which also has that sweetness to it. It's just something that they do that makes it too sweet for my tastes. So,
we do have one more beer. I almost forgot. Adirondacks Oktoberfest.
Well, I wanted to try to get that one to do it specifically for the show. So we
we'll
may hold off on that and
right,
try to get that one specifically to do as a
I haven't seen it
a full
yet.
review. We won't leave that to the back end of this.
Well, all I gotta say is if I can't find it around here in the next 2 weeks, I'll go back up to Lake George to get it.
Either that or
because they do have it there. Because I asked the guy I'm like. I didn't tell you this, but when I went up to Lake George with my friend the other day, last week, we went up there and we were just walking around. We went back to Adirondack Brewery, get lunch, and it was delicious, as we had before. And they had their Oktoberfest on there, and I got it. It was really good. And so I asked the guy if, it came in 6-packs or 12-packs. Because even though we're only fucking 40 minutes away from Lake George, I have never seen in my life like a fall variety pack. I see like their summer and like hot packs from them, but never a fall variety pack or their Oktoberfest. So I asked our waiter if, they had it in 6 or 12 packs, and he said, you go check. And he said, yeah, they do, and they could add it to my bill. I was like, oh, no, it's okay. I'll keep like an eye out for it. So that's what I'm going to do. If I don't see it within 2 weeks, I will go back up there and get it. Because it's that damn good.
It is good.
So we'll save it. And you had it this week at our local pub grill station.
Yep. It is good. It's delicious. So I want to save that one. See if we can get it specifically for the show. All right, let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Stay tuned. All right, we're back. We're going to talk about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Tobe Hooper's first film, and one that really put him on the map. This film has really come a long way from when it was first made in 1974, because at that time, it wasn't it wasn't lauded as a film. It was more so a schlockfest, put down by a lot of critics as being very over the top, almost, and some would say almost like nasty in the way that it was presented. And I think I agree with that. I think even watching it now, it feels like a very dirty film. Does that make sense to you?
It's definitely an exploitation film.
It definitely is. It feels it feels dirty. It feels grimy. It feels.
Well, that's what I was telling you. We were watching the movie. Is the 70s, like, wow, what a great time to do horror films. The aesthetic and the look of the 70s, not like in this film, but just in general. Like the look and what the film and like how like film at the time was made, like how they present like the credits, and scores
and the limitations
fit perfectly within like that's why exploitation films, in general, were huge then. They became like really a thing. It fits with the times. Like just think about like films from like 1969 to like then. It's only a 5-year jump, and it's like, holy, what a jump.
Yeah.
Just imagine this film being made in 1969. Wouldn't happen.
It would have had to have been in a different country.
Would like
you know what I mean?
Well, that's why I said too. Also, like it's like, man, I asked you, I'm like, did Tobe Hooper watch a lot of Giallos before he made this movie? And you said you didn't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
And like maybe he did not. I would almost guess he would have had to, because a lot of like the cinematography in this, to me, is very reminiscent of like a Giallo film.
I think,
and how certain things are blocked, and how they show what's going on. Like very like the whole like scene near the end where you see like the character's eyes like focused on, and they're focusing on, not just on her eyes, but like the veins in her eyes like being bloodshot and bulging out of her eyes. Like, that to me is very Giallo-esque. It's not something you would see in like cinematography of like American films at the time.
Yeah, I think that cinematography is really what sets the Texas Chainsaw Massacre apart from some of the other films that were coming out at the time. Because slasher films at that time, they were getting big. In the Giallo genre was in full swing at that time, late 60s with Mario Bava hits, and then, into the 70s. It was getting big in Italy, maybe not so much in America at that time. But this film really does do a lot with the cinematography in terms of just making the viewer feel uncomfortable.
Almost nauseous.
Yeah, even the opening credits of the film. You get that first realistic sort of almost like documentary opening that's kind of a prelude to what's to come. And then there's just that shot of like a body on a cross that's just decaying and sitting out in the hot sun of Texas. And it's a very grisly scene, and Tobe Hooper doesn't shy away from like showing that or forcing the viewer to watch it for long periods of time. And that's true of a lot of the scenes in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now, some of that may be due to a low budget, but at the same time, it works very well because it puts the viewer in that realistic mindset of like, look at how dingy and kind of gross and disgusting this film really it is in the setting that these characters are in, and it puts you in that frame of mind. I think that that's probably one of the biggest things that sets this film apart, is that it really does a good job of making you feel like you're there, like, and making you kind of cringe at all the things that are going on. And like we said, there is like a 4K release of this film, 4K scan. They've tried to pull out all the stops, make sure that it's very, it's got a great HD transfer. But the best way to watch this film really is to watch it in sort of a grainy, not quite.
Well, no, and that's what I'm saying. Like again, like the 70s, like, yeah, the film quality is like better than like it was in the 50s and 60s. But at the same time, like lower budget films like this have a certain aesthetic to like the quality of the film. Because again, this is back like when you like if you want the cream of the crop for your color in your picture, you gotta have Technicolor.
You're going with Technicolor.
You're not getting like color vision, or things like that. So it's like, again, there's like a certain quality, and I think that's like films like this benefit from that, like the fact that they are low budget, so they have that overall grainy film look that you would never really be able to properly get today, because they would all film today just about, except very few exceptions. It's all shot digitally now.
Yeah,
I think who outside of Tarantino these days is using film?
I don't know.
And like, even if you want to replicate that, you're replicating that with computers, and it's not gonna come anywhere near.
It's difficult to pull that off.
It's not gonna ever feel authentic. It's the same problem that CGI has. It's never, no matter how good it ever gets, it's never going to feel authentic. Like a crappy practical effect will feel. Maybe crappy, but you can feel. It's tangible to the mind. And I think the aesthetic of this film, is greatly benefited from its low budget. And again, too, like, who wants to also see like a really big budget horror film?
No. You don't want the flashy effects. You don't want the special effects that rely on CGI rather than just practical.
Because the fact that if you have a low budget, you have to get, especially with a horror film, it lends itself more because you have to get really creative. And then you have to think of and then figure out where you want to be descriptive and show the gore and the effect, and where you're going to leave it to the viewer's imagination.
Yeah, and I mean, Tobe Hooper really had to get creative for this too, because he's basically using actors and actresses that are just college kids. This was at a time where he was a professor and he wanted to make a horror film, and he had the resources available to him that, here's some college-age actors and actresses. Similar story to Wes Craven. Exactly. And you pull them in, you do what you need to do. And I think it lends itself a little bit more, too, because there's almost that sort of improvisational nature to it, that it's like you could get away with, maybe your actors don't really know specifically what's going to happen in the show, in the movie. So in this shot, we're going to have Gunnar Hansen come through as Leatherface and drag you into a room. Well, maybe the actress doesn't know that. You can kind of get away with that. Improvisational.
Makes it more genuine.
Exactly.
That's like a wrestling thing. Like, that's like buying into the whole wrestling. If you're not really into a lot of people say with wrestling, it's fake. How can people like that garbage? Well, films are fake and stuff too, but I mean, what the attachment comes not just from the bouts within the ring, though they are entertaining. It's the emotion, and then making you believe what's going on is real. So if something like that in a film, the actors doesn't know, hey, you're gonna get dragged away in a second, and you get an authentic scare from the actual participant in that it wasn't intended. That's akin to wrestling psychology, and I think that would work well in a film like this, having moments like that where you don't know and people participating don't quite know either.
Yeah, I think that's there's definitely that feeling, even if it was scripted, and even if it is in the the actors know. There's a few moments in Texas Chainsaw Massacre where the audience isn't really cued into what's going to happen, because besides the sort of noisy soundtrack that this film has, which is
very noisy.
Right, it's noisy. It's populated with, a lot of I would say probably timpani hits, because it does sound like a lot of like the ringing from a timpani and cymbal splashes.
So, and a lot of the sound effects are just like constant like hearing like an engine going. Or,
Yeah,
like when
tractor running,
or the
generators, stuff like that. Those things, those are sounds that really put you into that realistic mindset as well. It's like, well, I guess I'm there. Those types of things really lend itself to the film's creepiness as well, and you're kind of put into that, and you're not really set up for it because there's no music sting, there's no like swelling of chords to signify
like an actual score.
Yeah, there's it's not like, oh, it's getting creepy now, something's gonna happen. What I'm thinking of is when Pam first enters the house, with Leatherface in it. And she's kind of just searching around. She's like, hello, is anybody here? She's looking for her boyfriend. And there's no real cue that this is going to happen, but she walks out the door and Gunnar Hansen pops out and just grabs her from behind. There's no cue there. There's no music. There's nothing there to signify that this is going to happen. And yet it does. And you're kind of caught off guard, especially watching it for the first time, because there's no expectations. It just happens. And it is almost like watching a real life sort of documentary of that happening, because
which is what they're going for too, is they're saying it's based on a true story, which it's not. I mean,
yeah, it's not based on a true story. It's based on Ed Gein, the serial killer,
but it's not.
And it's
inspired.
It has nothing to do.
I say based would be a generous loose, because it's not. It's inspired. I would, because it's not like Ed Gein didn't walk around.
No. But I mean, it's definitely there's those moments that really just catch you off guard, and I think that's probably one of the strongest parts of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, is that things happen and you don't really expect them to, and there's nothing that sets you up for it, especially watching for the first time. So if you're thinking about audiences back in 1974 watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre for the first time, that was probably very startling to just all of a sudden have a guy in a human mask burst through a door and grab somebody. That was an event that probably just seemed to come out of nowhere, especially watching the setup for Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which Tobe Hooper, he does do a good job of setting up weird things that are going to happen and still making them seem eerie and out of place. So we know that these characters are traveling to Texas. They're going through this weird kind of backwoods town. There are a lot of weird people around. They pick up a hitchhiker. He's strange. He cuts himself and is obsessed with butchery. There's the gas station attendants who are obviously not quite right. And then eventually you have that dilapidated house that they're visiting.
So didn't the 70s just love like scary hillbillies?
Yeah, I mean, scary hillbillies and obviously mentally deranged people who need some help.
Well, they wouldn't have viewed it that way.
No, they would have found them to be
just fucking crazy.
Yeah, there's no,
just the aesthetics and like the characteristics of like the villains in this. Very reminiscent. I know it comes out a couple of years later. It's like Deliverance.
Right.
Which isn't necessarily a horror film, but it's the same, it is in certain aspects a horror film.
Yeah.
With what happens, in the film. And it's almost reminiscent of that. Like, Leatherface's family is reminiscent of like the people of the Appalachia, in Deliverance. The way it's portrayed.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I agree. I think that they do a really good job with that sort of thing though, and making sure that like in the beginning with that, with the guy that will eventually become part of the family, Leatherface's family, and they don't get names per se, but
the hitchhiker.
Yeah, they just have, titles. They do a good job of setting that up and kind of setting the tone for the rest of the film. in terms of just the oddness that's going to be happening. I know a lot of people are a little bit, they have a expectation for films to kind of like move at a clip, kind of quickly through each of their scenes. And Tobe Hooper doesn't really do that with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's kind of he allows the scenes to play out for the length of time that they need. So that opening scene with the hitchhiker in the van is kind of an unbroken scene that plays out for a long period of time. I would say like probably 5 to 10 minutes of just the hitchhiker in the van doing his thing. And that's not really something that we see a whole lot because scenes are broken up. There's a swap from scene to scene as, people, there's like multiple scenes happening at once. We don't really see like an unbroken scene where one weird thing is happening. And that's what Tobe Hooper delivers with that hitchhiker. And I can see how some people might be put off by that it's, it seems like it's too long, but also it's very realistic in the way that it's represented as though we're in the van and we're seeing this happen at the same time that the characters are. And we're kind of thinking like, what the hell is going on here? Like, this is very strange.
I wouldn't have picked him up from the get-go.
No, I wouldn't either.
You just think about it. It's like, what different times? Like, who these days picks up hitchhikers?
Yeah, that's. I mean, now we wouldn't, but I guess there are many films that were set at that time that they did pick up.
No, I know.
Maybe it was a thing. I mean,
like in Friday the 13th.
They just did that.
The one girl in the beginning of Friday. Remember we reviewed Friday the 13th, right? In the beginning, like the girl that was trying to get to Camp Crystal Lake.
Yeah.
Guy's like, yeah, sure, I'll give you a ride, and just picks her up and get a little exposition from her, like what she's going to do, and it's like, man, how times have changed. Nobody fucking picks up hitchhikers anymore.
Yeah.
And you don't really get to see them that often because they know damn well, oh, no one's going to pick me up.
That is true. Yeah. Yeah. How about, we haven't really talked about some of the later scenes where it kind of gets to be a little bit more humorous. As we get to...
Intentionally or unintentionally?
Yeah, I mean, we get to the family, and obviously we have the old man, who is the gas station attendant and really doesn't seem to have a whole lot of control over his what we're supposed to take as like sons or, people, the guys that he lives with. Brothers, whatever they are, part of the family. They have some sort of like a humor to them, a black comedy that I do think is intentional within the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And it serves to make it a little bit creepier.
I was saying, I can almost see at the time though. I mean, I agree that I think they're supposed to come off as intentionally humorous and like a black comedy, but I can see at the time though, because of the films that were coming out at the time, it probably playing more creepy, and people watching it like, oh, that's creepy. But now, like today, like someone who, if you see in the films of today, you could totally be like, oh yeah, they're fucking goofy, sitting there clapping, and acting like assholes, and like, oh yay, we're gonna kill, Grandpa's gonna smash her with a hammer, yay,
Yeah.
I could see how then it would come off as creepy, like again, like. When you think, like, the Night of the Living Dead, like, how today, like, when you think of a lot of things that happen in it, I mean, doesn't detract from the film, but it's more kind of comes off as campy and goofy, whereas, back then, it was legitimate scary.
Mm-hmm.
And because people hadn't seen that before. So I think that's one thing that kind of sucks, about, not being able to watch these films in the time that they came out and the context that they were originally set in, because then, were robbed of what we could have originally felt if you were to see it like with a totally blank slate.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me would be like again, like with like a film like this, that'd be like interesting, just because of the nature of the violence in the film, which this film was banned in several countries for several years for it being overly violent. And you watch it today, and it's not, it's not very gory.
No, a lot of it does happen either off screen. If we're talking about like some of the deaths, like some of the people that are secondary characters within the film, their deaths happen off screen, and we really don't see much of the violence of that.
You would think a film called Texas Chainsaw Massacre would be like, today would be a total fucking gore fest. You see
and
chainsaw ripping, and like you don't see that.
No,
the goriest deaths you get in this film are two people getting killed with a hammer over the head. Granted, they work really well. I love how very realistic Tobe Hooper takes those like deaths, like literally just plunk right on the head, and it's not like a cartoony like what you would expect, like splat. It's literally just like a thunk in the head, and like the person drops. You can
it's a great effect because of how realistic it is,
and how serious they like take that.
Yeah, and it's not like we need to zoom in for this shot. It's more of an out. It's centered, but it's zoomed out, and you kind of just see that happen. And the actor drops, and it's a great drop. I mean, it's a very realistic depiction of like getting smacked in the head, and you're just like fucking out. You're just you're done. That's it. And it's a really effective moment because of that. And I think again, like you said, the film is not that violent. When compared to today, it works because realistically, getting smacked in the head like that is not going to look particularly violent. But it's still going to be gruesome as we see the guy then starts convulsing on the ground.
I know, and I like I said, I totally agree. Because like if you were to see it today, it'd be like we got to have this really like detailed, either CGI or like practical effect of like the, like the skull and like here like a splatting noise and like things like that. Like, if you think about it, if this film was made 10 years later and they did that in the 80s, it would be very much like a splat, into the head, and like, oh look, you can see his head's caved in, but like the sound effects and how they would probably choose to show it would totally mitigate, the gruesomeness of it. You'd be like, yeah. That's the thing.
Yeah, I think it really works in this film's favor that they didn't have a lot of money, so they did what they could with those moments. And it's a lot of it, again, it happens off screen or you don't really see it. So like when Franklin's getting carved up with the chainsaw, you would expect now, or even back in the 80s, to see like a lot of blood flying around.
It'd be the Evil Dead remake.
Yeah,
with
exactly.
With the chainsaw with that.
But in this case, you really only see from behind as Franklin is getting cut up. So you see the chainsaw coming down. But you don't really see a lot of the actual.
You don't even see blood like shooting out.
No, you don't see any of that moment.
You just hear him writhing in pain as he's
I think the most violent moment that you get is when the hitchhikers run over by the truck, which is actually a very explicit. Like, here's a dummy, and it's getting crushed under a giant truck. But other than that, a lot of it happens off screen, or just more so the visceral nature of that.
Like the meat hook.
Right.
You don't see the meat hook impaling the girl, but just like the idea of like Leatherface like taking her and like setting her like right on the meat hook, and then the way it's the film, that part's shot and blocked where like the table and Leatherface blocking, you don't ever get to see behind like the hook actually in her. You just see her hanging off of it. That's well enough.
Yeah.
Again, that's very smart. That's knowing the limitations of what you have to work with, and then making it so you're leaving it up to the viewer's imagination. You don't have to show somebody being impaled on a meat hook to make people have like a visceral reaction to it. Just the thought alone. Like, you're seeing it happen, but you're not seeing it totally at all. You're seeing only 20% of it. And that alone, leaving the rest of it up to the viewer's mind, is much more impactful and, thought-provoking and creepy, and will give you more, like, scares than, like, if it was done today, you would actually see her getting, like, shoved on the meat hook going into the rib cage, the blood, and, like, blood coming out of her mouth, and, they would make sure, like, we gotta show everything.
Yeah.
This doesn't do that. It works in its favor.
One thing I really like about the film too is that, we talked about the the claim that this is based on a true story. It's really not, but it is. It is inspired by Ed Gein, the serial killer, and you can see a lot of that inspiration within the film because, they kind of give us a backstory to these characters, and in a sense, Ed Gein, about why they are obsessed with using all parts of the human body or any body for their home. Because in Ed Gein, he did take body parts from graves and the people that he killed, and he made them into everyday objects like lampshades and bedposts and things like that. Very demented individual. But the Texas Chainsaw Massacre takes that and it runs with it because you kind of get the sense that these people were butchers. They were people who were working in the factories who had their jobs taken from them and didn't really know what to do with themselves at that point because they had been so accustomed to just doing this very dirty, I won't say amoral, but different work of killing things, and then all of a sudden they didn't have that job anymore. And that's kind of a understated moment in Texas Chainsaw Massacre that kind of happens on the outskirts of their storyline, is that they are talking about these butcher plants that are around the area that have since gotten rid of the people who used to do the butchery, like killing cows, and they've replaced them with machines that just do it for them. And so that's part of the hitchhiker story, is that his family used to do that work and now they're out of it. So now what do? They've kind of tried to make their lives accustomed to not having that work and doing it in other ways.
Yeah, but at the same time, I don't think they didn't like.
They're not excusing it. Obviously, they're not
saying they didn't start butchering people because like, I don't know, have a cow to butcher anymore.
No, they're not.
They're already
Yeah, they're not excusing that activity, but they're trying to draw the comparison there, and I think it works. If you don't have that idea, that context, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it really doesn't have that much of a theme. It's just about people going to a house and then eventually winding up in the wrong place at the wrong time and meeting their demise.
Well, apparently Tobe Hooper says it's supposed to be like a metaphor for Watergate and government lying to people. That's where the whole "this is a true story" comes from.
Yeah, I mean...
Which I find that to be...
I think it's a stretch, because I'm one of those people who, you have to actually have something within the storyline that actually draws a conclusion like that. And
that you can actually make a comparison.
Right, you can't... In Texas Chainsaw Massacre...
And not, like, have to use artistic license. Like, oh, so this... The chainsaw represents,
There's definitely nothing in the film that would relate back to that, like where a general audience member would be like, that's Watergate. There's nothing,
or like government, big government.
No, there's nothing like that. But I do think you can draw a comparison to saying like, well, here's an issue with uneducated working class people being taken out of their jobs. I think that's probably a stronger thematic resonance than what Tobe Hooper is claiming the film is about. But I think, that it's an interesting concept that you can draw with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And it does relate back to Ed Gein as well, because it does take a lot of inspiration from what he used to do in terms of, using those body parts. Even the film's opening and the radio moments and the, some of the radio specials that we get, and they're just really quick. They do relate to the grave robberies that the hitchhiker does. That is only really touched upon very, very slightly in the film. Like when the old man says, you got to stay away from those cemeteries. That's a reference to him grave robbing and getting all of those parts and bones and pieces.
Reminds you of Seth from Red Dead Redemption.
Yeah, and it doesn't really come up. I think that's some good subtext there, because it doesn't, like, if you're not looking for it, you definitely wouldn't.
Well, no, because like especially if you're not paying attention, because like some of those radio broadcasts, like you hear like weather forecasts and like barometer pressure, and like if you're not paying attention, like you start tuning out, you're gonna miss the part after that where they're talking about the recent grave robberies and but no, I agree. You know what too? I also like the idea in treating it more as they're people.
Mm-hmm.
And that they're not monsters. I like that in like a slasher film. I like the villain to be, villains.
Yeah.
To be more human. If there's one fault, like you can like say with like Halloween. I mean, not necessarily the original, because the original Michael Myers is human. Yeah, they call him the Boogeyman and Mr. Sandman and all that. But even though like what him surviving what happens at the end of Halloween, after Donald Pleasance shoots him, 5 times and falling off the roof, even though that's unlikely and improbable, it's plausible.
Mm-hmm.
And leaving the human nature there, the fact that he seems demon-like, and he's human, I think adds to the film. And then when you get later down in the film, it's like, oh no, he's like essentially, Satan's walking spawn. It takes away from the mystique.
Yeah, once you get into
and that's where you're getting more into like, with like Friday the 13th type of territory. Like, all right, you're rooting for the killer because he's, an unstoppable killing machine. And here in probably a lot of people, unless you're really into Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Leatherface comes off as totally as like a demonic type of killer.
He does, yeah.
Wears like a skin mask, wields a chainsaw. He's big and lumbering. Seems like he's impervious to pain. But that's not what this film is. He's just a fucking crazy person. And I think that human element is what makes it more threatening and scary. That it's not something like otherworldly. It's something like, holy shit, this is actually something human.
I think one thing that some people complain about is the amount of screaming and yelling that takes place during the final dinner scene. How do you feel about that?
I do think it's too much.
I've always felt like it's
how her lungs haven't like given out, and like the fact that she's been running for like 45 minutes and like it's like, what could stand, like she could like probably run 3 miles singing a song, like she's ready for the army and like be jogging 10 miles and singing with 40 pounds of gear. It becomes taxing. What I will say that I do like is I love the fact that all Leatherface does is have really weird and creepy grunts and groans and moans that like constantly he's just grunting and moaning and like this high-pitched squeal,
like he's never really learned English.
Like he's never learned to speak. He's I mean, I don't know what the the overall genesis of the backstory of the character is like, but it's like almost like, again, like almost like it's deliverance, like it's incestuous, inbreeding, and this is what has come about, and because he's in this close family that's closed off from normal society, he hasn't learned to cope, and there's the way again. I'm assuming the gas station attendant's supposed to be his dad and not like an older brother.
Right.
Because just the way he treats him, like he's constantly berating him and like beating him, like kind of like like a bastard son.
Yeah,
almost.
I mean, it does come out in Texas Chainsaw Massacre too, in terms of like the family relationship. But just watching in the first film, like as a viewer watching the first film, you wouldn't know exactly what the relationship is. But yeah, I would assume father. I've always thought that the dinner scene came off a little long.
They take forever to get to the whole.
Yeah, because even at
Grandpa's gonna smash you with the hammer.
Even at like only 80 minutes, this film's only an hour and 20 minutes. That part of it seems to drag on for a little too long. I think that Tobe Hooper, left it there for just a little bit too long in terms of like how
just
much
pad the runtime out.
Yeah, there's a couple scenes that end up like that one, the dinner scene, the chase that has the Leatherface chasing Sherry through the brush,
yeah.
and it's like that happens. Then they go into the house. Then they go back into the forest.
It's tense, but at the same time, no, you're right. It does, linger.
It's just a little bit too long. However, watching this time, I did take note of like what would it be like if it was like a realistic scenario, and I can see someone being like, I'm not going to stop screaming until someone saves me. You know what I mean? Like
hoping that somebody might.
I can see like now. Thinking about the screaming, in terms of watching a film, it may be annoying to hear all that screaming. But at the same time, being in that situation, you're probably going to be screaming for forever until somebody saves you or you die. So I definitely see the realism in that. I'll say that Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, I feel, is worse in this regard because there's constantly screaming. It's like screaming the entire film. So that's like fatiguing to me to watch a film and like have somebody screaming constantly. That really tires me out.
One thing too about that whole chase that I love, because it's something like a modern horror film you would never see. It's just like an ingenious thing. I'm trapped as Leatherface is running up the stairs trying to get to me. What do? I fucking jump out the window from a second story, possibly breaking my legs. Oh well, worth the risk.
In this case, she does it twice.
I know, and later she does it.
2 windows.
Yeah, but no, it's like, wow, it's like if you watch like Scream and it's like people like tripping, like no, don't. It's like you bitch go, like you can
jump out the window, jump out the door, jump out whatever you can.
Yeah, you may break your leg or an ankle or something, but you'll still got a better chance than like just like no, don't. Going Willy Wonka like no, stop, no.
One of my favorite moments in this film is the ending, where the driver of a truck,
big rig,
the big rig, Black Maria, just happens upon this very crazy scenario, and he's like all into it. I mean, you can't like just drive the truck through and not be a part of this scenario at that point.
Well, he did kill someone.
Yes, he did. So I just like that because it's like this. I can just imagine this guy just trucking along, gotta get to my destination, whatever. Then all of a sudden, fucking running over a crazy man in the road, and then another guy with a chainsaw chasing after
bloody limping.
A woman. It's just that scenario right there. I want to know Texas Chainsaw Massacre from that guy's point of view. And that guy just kind of disappears, just like gone after he knocks Leatherface on his ass and he cuts himself with a chainsaw. He gets the fuck out of there, and I want to know what happens to that guy because we don't know. We know that Leatherface doesn't succeed, and she gets away in a pickup truck.
Yeah, by a guy that's just driving by.
Yeah.
Like this.
Just happens to drive by, and then Leatherface does a little dance at the end. He didn't succeed, but he
very
can still
iconic
dance.
Too.
Yeah, that became a big thing, and not only Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 and kind of a reversal in that, but also in Zombies Ate My Neighbors. There's a chainsaw guy in that.
It does that.
Does a little dance in there. So very iconic little dance for.
As great as that game,
Leatherface?
You'll say as great as that game was. Fuck it for being so goddamn hard.
Oh, it was terribly hard. But anything else that you want to add before we get into a rating?
Seeing as we're honoring Tobe Hooper, we don't really have to say much about the acting. It's very.
I mean, there's not a lot of storyline for these characters, so
no.
There's no real.
It's it's just there, and
yeah.
I think we should bring up the kind of importance of this film.
Mm-hmm.
You can clearly see how this film would, down the line, inspire future films, especially Rob Zombie's horror films. If anything, all of his films are literally like
taking from
this.
Yeah. I mean, especially
the whole
House of Corpses
in Devil's Rejects. Devil's Rejects is literally let's just put them on the road.
Yeah. It's very much, you can certainly see
his version of Halloween. It's literally like, hey, let's just fucking,
Rob Zombie's aesthetic is taken directly from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I think even like his hellbilly persona, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that sort of thing is definitely very much inspired by Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But it's helped with a lot of other things too. I mean, so many movies have in small part taken from either this or like The Hills Have Eyes, and probably a combination of them.
I say that's another thing too. Like Wes Craven's, because again, like Hills Have Eyes have like insane, like incestuous,
And it became a big part of the 80s as well, in terms of like backwoods hillbillies trying to kill you, like Just Before Dawn, or some, like there's many hillbilly killers that like Motel Hell. You could, a lot of them are very, very similar and inspired, and obviously they draw from a lot of different films, but definitely a huge inspiration for sure from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Can't deny that. It's pretty interesting to see just how much the Texas and sometimes, like, when you think back about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it kind of blends in with those slasher films of the 80s, but it's not.
Yeah,
it's 1974. So a lot earlier than some of those other films that you think of when you think of like iconic slasher films. So
I think people though are in that case would be mixing that with like the second one, which would be more in line with that. Because if you watch this film, it's hard to mistake. It's very hard to mistake this film for like an 80s film. It's very easily like that's an exploitation film from the early 70s. Very easily, you can like just be like the abrupt ending, the like, ooh, this is a real story, and all those like certain aesthetics is very much like yeah, that's what it is.
For a similar film like that, check out The Town That Dreaded Sundown. Also, it's it has that same aesthetic, so I think that if someone likes the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you would certainly like The Town That Dreaded Sundown as well. Just a little film that you should check out. All right, so what would you rate the Texas Chainsaw Massacre out of 10 rubber mallets?
I'll give it a 7.5.
Yeah,
7.5.
I mean, I think that you're right around like what I would give it. I think I would give it like maybe 7, probably an 8. I would say. But I do think, for all of the things that it does really well, watching now, you definitely see some of the flaws in terms of like how long Tobe Hooper allows those scenes to play out. Maybe he does push the boundary a few times. Some scenes drive on a little too long.
Meandering, like discussions between... You said we didn't even really talk about the characters because again they're not really.
Yeah, they don't really have too much of a bearing
outside of Leatherface's family. It's our main group, like most horror films. You don't really need to even more so in this. Like in most horror films, like Halloween, for instance, Laurie Strode. Sally's not memorable at all as the heroine, and she's not even a heroine in this. She's just a survivor. Which I get is what they're going for, because again, it's supposed to be allegedly, based on a true story. So that makes sense that she doesn't come off as heroic and saves the day or anything like that. And, she just literally escapes barely by the skin of her teeth and survives. But even so, she's not memorable. She's boring. She's bland. She's just there to not wear a bra. And then, we also have, the conversation between her and her brother Franklin, and they're just, meandering and long, and they don't really add anything to their characters. It's just kind of, very window dressing of, background. Oh, you're mad at me, aren't you?
They just needed some character stuff.
To fill in, otherwise you'd have a 45-minute film.
Yeah, and I think that that's probably the biggest flaw with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is that some of those scenes that run long, they do feel like they're just filler. Just there to kind of fill some time to make a longer, a longer film, because this is only 80 minutes long already. And that's with filler moments. So there is that risk that, if this would be like a 70-minute film, would it get released to theaters? Would it have a major...
Then it would have. It wouldn't today.
Right, yeah.
A 70-minute film today would not
Still
fly
would
at
probably
all.
be, a little bit questionable. So, that was more of like a 50s and 60s thing. 60, 70-minute films. But I do think that those moments are there for filler, and they are probably the most problematic and flawed moments of the film, of just Hooper pushing scenes out to more than they can actually warrant, like why they would be that long. So
Well, at the same time, you don't want them to, like what they would do today, expound upon endlessly.
yeah, no, that's true too.
Backstory,
Yeah,
you
we
know.
don't need the backstory for these characters. We just know that they're visiting their old grandpappy's grave, and they're in the house, and while it would be nice to figure out why exactly they want to visit a decrepit old house for no reason, we don't need it. There's nothing, it's
It's the 70s. What else you got to do in your summer?
just having a road trip, smoking pot in a abandoned house, I guess.
I know, as I told you, it's like, man, what a great spot. Like, hey, I'm going to take you to a place, girl, you never been fucked before. Where? Oh, this place has got, skulls and
In a foundation, and that's about it.
and spiders everywhere. Oh, yeah. You're not going to know what's,
And a swimming hole, and that's it. You're going to have a lot of fun here.
No tire swing, though.
No.
That's a shame.
It is. All right, so anything else you want to add about Texas Chainsaw Massacre before we close this out?
No.
I think we hit on pretty much everything.
I mean, it's an iconic film, and I can see why it is. Again, like, I do love Leatherface and how he's portrayed in this. Like, I love the fact that he is, like, just grunting, wild, crazy, and...
Yeah, and no...
Yeah.
He's human, but also inhuman, in that he's obviously got something wrong with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and there's nothing really to go on for the viewer, so you're just kind of along for the ride. I think that's probably the biggest credit that you can give Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and that it influenced so many other films. So thank you, Tobe Hooper. We appreciate it that you were able to give us so many great horror films, and hopefully ones that we can cover on subsequent episodes of the show. I definitely want to do the Funhouse at some point. Should we disclose what we're doing now? We can finally
We can
give away what we're doing for Halloween.
get people hyped up.
So starting in September, which is just next week, obviously when this episode releases, it's going to be the end of August 31st. Goodbye summer, hello fall.
You still got 22 more days.
I consider fall hitting on September 1st.
Well, especially around here.
Yeah.
Like within a day, just dropped. Like all of a sudden went from 80 to 60.
It's fine with me.
Well, me too. I'm just
Yeah.
saying. I did get angry when I saw they have pumpkin spice like coffee creamer out already. I'm like, no.
Yeah, it's been at Dunkin' for a couple weeks now.
Assholes.
Sarah's already had 3. But we are doing a special Halloween season for the podcast.
Well, we did that last year though.
We did Saw last year.
But we got to a late start.
Yeah. We're doing something a little bit different this time. We're not going to do like a franchise. We're actually going to do something called Remake-A-Ween. Woo! Sounds like fun. So we're going to be doing all remakes of horror films for the month of September and October. And we have a full list. We don't have a schedule just yet, but we're going to come up with one. We're going to come up with a specific schedule. But just know that next week we're doing it, right?
Does it come out next week?
I believe it comes out next week.
Well, you should check that.
I have to check that.
Don't lie to people right now.
I have to check that because I'm not sure exactly when it comes out. I think it comes out this Friday, September 8th. So actually, that's a lie. We're not going to get it next week. So what are we doing next week? It would make sense to do the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the remake.
Do you want to do it back to back?
We might as well. It would make sense.
It's up to you.
I don't know.
All right, we'll do it.
All right, I think it makes sense, and that's exactly why. Earlier in the show, I did talk about how Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974 fit in with our thematic Halloween stuff because we are going to be doing remakes and we do plan on doing the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So we'll probably do that next week just to tie in a little bit better and see Jessica Biel's butt as well.
It's been forever since
Yeah, it's been so long.
And I looked it up today. That movie doesn't feel like it came out in 2003.
Yeah,
no, the aesthetics and whatnot does scream.
Oh, I'm sure when we watch
screams, it, like, hey, Saw came out.
We're definitely
and,
going to see early 2000s.
But at the same time, it almost feels like it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
Which makes it funny that it took like 10 years later for like Friday and New Nightmare.
Yeah. Some of the other remakes that you can expect in this month, obviously. Friday the 13th, because there is a
That'll
Friday
be in October.
Yep, there is a Friday the 13th in October. Nightmare on Elm Street. Halloween. What else we got? Anything else?
House on Haunted Hill.
House on Haunted Hill. Yep.
Evil Dead.
We hadn't talked about that, but
I can't.
but that's one of them, I guess. Evil Dead. And then we have we're gonna have a couple special episodes for you too in October towards the end.
I just threw that one out there because it just kind of came to me. Yeah. I totally forgot there. Even though I went to see it in theaters, I forgot there was an Evil Dead remake.
Yep. And then we're gonna have the special episode because we're gonna have a special Halloween episode on Halloween. It'll release on Halloween, so it's gonna be jam packed.
We got a lot. We might be doing 2 episodes a week for some
who
episodes.
knows? This is gonna be a lot. We're putting a lot on ourselves. So
this is Ryan Santa season.
That's right. That's right. Yep. So next week, expect Texas Chainsaw Massacre the remake as we kick off Remake-A-Ween.
We might have to come up with a better name for the
Remake-A-Ween is great.
I know I came up with it.
It makes sense. It works. We're going with it.
I feel like people have done it before. I'm sure there's other people who've done the podcast.
I'm sure.
I guarantee it. Someone's beat me to the punch.
Oh yeah, for sure. But it doesn't matter. This is Blood and Black Rum podcast Remake-A-Ween, so
it's better than theirs.
That's right. All right, so stay with us for next week. We're gonna be doing Remake-A-Ween starting next week in September. And it's going to go all the way through October 31st. You can catch us on Facebook, facebook.com/Blood and Black Rum Podcast. We also have a group on there, so make sure you join that. We are on Twitter at Blood and Black Rum. Follow us and retweet our stuff. We are on SoundCloud, Stitcher, iTunes, and pretty much any other app you can use to listen to podcasts. So please rate and review on there. We're on Patreon, patreon.com/Blood and Black Rum Podcast. You can donate to us. Remember, that's a monthly donation, so don't donate any more than you can afford. And we have an email address, bloodandblackrumpodcast@gmail.com. You can write to us, request films for us to do. Let us know how much you like the show. We'll read it on air. And other than that, thank you for listening. We hope to see you back next week as we start Remake-A-Ween and get into the Halloween spirit. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see you around.
Take care.